Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit.
I imagine that it's fairly safe to say that I'm not the only person that the minute they conclude a run of DMing and they stop a game or finish up a story arc or whatever it is, they instinctively and immediately start to plan the next big thing. I do it every single time, I'm pretty sure. You think, yeah, give someone else a go. I'll take a back seat for a while, give it a bit of a rest, and then you're straight into the next thing. Which is fine. Got no problem with that. Other than, that perennial question, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So I wrapped up my ICRPG, and I'd happily return to that again. I've still got various aspects of that game unexplored, in particular some of the spin-offs like Hardsuit, and I've never done anything with Vigilante City, and I know my son's quite keen to do a Supers game. I always steer away from them. Not sure why. It's one of those things I'm probably going to have to bite the bullet one day and give it a go. I've got nothing against Supers, just not super familiar. Oh dear, super familiar. Nice one, Colin. And I've got Dragonbane, which is sort of, I don't know if you'd call it the new hotness, but it's kind of the new hotness. In the circles I move in, I feel like it is. I've got Pirate Borg, which is another fresh release from Free League, and I like the look of it, and I was supposed to be doing a pirate game with my last ICRPG game, and it turns out it wasn't all that piratey. We got into an exploration of an island, and the whole piracy thing took a bit of a backseat, and it took an unexpected turn, as you've got to expect if you're not running some kind of linear adventure. And I've got, well, this is the thing, I've got my old Adventures in Middle-earth. I picked that up round about when it came out several years ago, and in part of the purge of my games, I thought, do you know what, I think I'll move it on. Got the books out, got 9 books, started looking through them, and I thought, do you know what, I do still like the idea of this game. I think I was a little bit intimidated by it, but I thought, do you know, I'm just going to, I picked up Wildland Adventures, and I thought, I'm just going to crack this one open, have a little look through it again, and just started reading. And I feel like I got the bug a little bit. I had my Howard Shore playing in the background to kind of drown out some other television program that my family were watching in the distance, and it was kind of like detracting from my reading, because I could hear these voices in the program they were all watching. I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll create a bit of that Lord of the Rings kind of vibe. Get some soundtracks playing, and it was really cool, and kind of you got that epic soundtrack, and I could picture stuff in my mind. I'm reading through the book, and just even if you didn't ever play the RPG, just that alone, reading the books, listening to the music, it's that, well, whatever we call that lonely fun type of thing that DMs do. Or 9 books though, that's a chunk of book. I don't know what really possessed me to get 9 books. I bought everything that was available, with the exception of the Lawmaster screen. So a little bit excessive, but this is the danger. You see, I get into something, and I tend to overindulge. So I don't know that I could say buyer's remorse, but I don't get through books very quickly, and I could probably take the Player's Handbook and the Lawmaster's Guide, and then one of those other books that would keep me going for as long as I needed, really. However, we'll see. they're not super dense. That is the thing. So I can, when I was reading it, I was kind of going along at quite a nice pace. I liked the artwork, that kind of drew me along, and I made good headway. I think out of the 7 adventures, I've now read 3 in that book, and that was more or less in one sitting. And I'm not a big fan of reading through adventures, but I found this quite enjoyable. Now, I would say Wilderland Adventures, it is fairly linear. You can play each adventure as a standalone, but they come together and form a little mini campaign. And each one can represent a season of adventuring. You play adventures in Middle-earth in seasons. It does suggest at the beginning of the book that you can maybe play a couple of the scenarios per season, or you can spread them out and do one per season, pad them out a little bit and make it go a little bit longer. There's lots of good advice on how to run the games, ways you can tie them together, ways you can make them work as a standalone. All in all, I think it's quite a nice product, especially perhaps if you're not so familiar with running games. It kind of holds you. It's got quite a hand-holdy feel to it. I think that's fair to say. Not a lot of jumping around in the books. Every now and then it's got like bold text, or it refers you to the Lawmaster's Guide, which when you're reading it you think, oh, that's not ideal, I'd like to have it there. Without that, you're not getting much use out of your other books. So I feel like to justify the purchase, that they're putting that in there. In other words, like, oh, you really need to get this book, but if you've got it, as is likely, oh yeah, I'm going to delve into my Lawmaster's Guide now. I get it. We've got to sell books, but the production of them is lovely. They're really nicely put together. My son recently picked up the One Ring, the Free League. If he does actually ever run that, it would be nice to compare the two. I've played some first edition One Ring. This is second edition One Ring. And there is a real different emphasis to the style of play, even in the kind of the 5e version, if you like. You have got this whole epic kind of journeys mechanism, and then you've got the audiences. And I haven't seen a lot of it played. I haven't really played Adventures in Middle-earth. I'm imagining it's going to feel quite different to like your regular game of D&D, which will be a refreshing change. And I've talked a lot about it, and I've looked at the rules, and I've just never got it to the table, not really tried out any of my kind of like theories on it, if you like. I've got these hypotheses. Whatever. What is the plural of hypothesis? Wow, I feel like I should know that. I've also got a call in from Webster of Roleplay Rescue, and he just missed going into the last episode. I'd produced it, I hadn't released it. I was going to add something on the end, put Che on the end, and I thought, no, I don't want to do that and kind of rush a response, and that the episode was long enough, so I've kept it for this episode. Che talks about things we're comfortable with and when we're not comfortable and when we are comfortable. And typically, I don't love running from books. I tend to like look at adventures and adventure books and RPG books and take the content that I want out and kind of rebuild it in another way. Currently, that is me using a laptop with Google Slides. Previously, I've got like a DM's journal, as it were, or logbook kind of sketchbook where I put everything in there. Or I've got a combination of that and index cards, various sort of other forms of note taking. You can imagine I've used tablets and all sorts of stuff. But I very rarely run from the books. I feel like I get a little bit flustered with the books and I get a little bit lost. But reading through Adventures in Middle-earth, that could be a game that changes that to a large extent, I would say, especially the adventure. That looks particularly well suited to just playing through. You can more or less go from the front of the book to the back of the book, I reckon. Let's get to Che's call. Some really important points he makes, and it's a lovely call, and I really appreciate hearing from Che, as always.
Hey Colin, it's Che. Just woefully behind in catching up with episodes, but listening to your end of August state of play, and had two thoughts. The first one was, yes, as a podcaster, I find recording and externalizing my thoughts helps me process them. In my case, actually, I think like when I script out my podcast, that really helps me organize my thinking, and then I feel like I should record it. But also the Jim's Journal thing I do, that's me thinking out loud. That's a lot of the time when I'm working things out. So absolutely yes. Wanted to comment on the session you felt didn't go well. I found it's really interesting that you felt that going off half kind of done notes, the earlier iteration of your notes, was worse than totally just improving the session. And it God led you down the whole path of questions that you had about the quality of those sessions. And I think it's really interesting to me that, you know, where we feel most comfortable, okay, is either where we feel like we have control over the material, we understand the material, and we've given it our very best, or where we're just completely winging it. And it sort of seems like if it feels a bit half-assed, if you don't mind me using that phrase, then we actually don't feel confident enough to then drive the session and everything else. And we kind of get into this internal monologue, I guess, a lot of the time about how bad it is. And that kind of just drives us into the ground. So I just found that really interesting. I also think just be really careful about your criticism, because like of yourself, I know that for myself, that can be really self-destructive and negative. Actually, did the players find like the session lackluster? I don't know. It wasn't terribly clear whether you were clear, so it might be worth asking them. But I think that the main thing was, if you're not enjoying something, like if you can figure out why you're not enjoying it, and obviously you can fix it. And I don't know, maybe one of the ways of fixing it is coming back to formulas. So whilst I kind of sometimes feel like formula, like you talked about, the ICRPG formulas can be like restrictive. Actually, if you're looking for inspiration, I guess it gives you a structure to work to, doesn't it? And maybe that's actually kind of cool. And maybe you want to marry that with the improv. Just kind of think, all right, I'm looking at these things, I'm trying to hit these highlights, and I'm going to kind of wing the in-between. Anyway, I don't know. I just found the whole thing fascinating. Wanted to call in and say thank you once again for sharing your thoughts. Oh, and of course, congratulations on becoming a teacher, because that's no mean feat. I think people don't realise how hard that is to get qualified. Well done. Game on.
So there's quite a lot to unpack there. So let's see how we get on. First of all, I would say that I definitely agree, and Che is right. You don't want to be too hard on yourself. Now, I can be guilty of that, and I think generally I'm quite used to it. Is that what I mean? Am I quite used to it? I'm not that fazed by being hard on myself. I think my character is, I'm quite stubborn, fairly resilient, and sometimes I think I kind of almost goad myself into producing something a little bit better. So it sounds perhaps that I'm being critical on myself, but I feel like I can kind of handle my self-criticism to a large extent. I actually respond fairly well. I quite like a bit of criticism. I feel over the years I found it spurs me on, because I kind of get that dig-in kind of mentality, and I tend to want to get back up and carry on fighting a little bit. So almost the more you knock me down, the more I want to get back up. So sometimes I kind of almost deliberately knock myself down a little bit to produce that bit of adrenaline to get myself back into the fight, as it were. I know that's all a little bit dramatic considering we're talking about RPGs, but if we think about it in a wider context. But at the same time, I do believe Che is right. You got to be careful. That's not going to suit everybody. Could be that I do it a bit too much. I might actually be a bit too hard on myself. And what I have tried to do is celebrate in recent times, celebrate my victories a little bit more, and try and give myself a little bit of credit here and there. I think that probably has helped save me sometimes, even when I knock myself down and then I'll have to drag myself up and come back in fighting again. That can put me in a little bit of a kind of keyed up, fired up kind of mood that can easily be misinterpreted by others as, you know, I'm angry or frustrated, when really I'm not. It's just kind of, I don't know, getting that sort of fire in my belly to produce something and get on with a task. Otherwise I can kind of procrastinate or maybe be a little bit wishy-washy. So that's something we've got to judge for ourselves, but I like how Che picked up on that for sure. Also, he mentioned this idea of being comfortable and the idea of the notes, and having notes that are maybe a bit wishy-washy and not the best, and not feeling comfortable with them, and actually feeling more comfortable just, you know, I would have felt more comfortable more or less just chucking all that away and just improvising. Yeah, that is true. And it's not just the quality of the notes. I think what was distracting me in my mind was this idea that I've got an inner voice telling me, how have you lost these notes? It's like a distraction going on at me. This inner voice saying, you had better notes than this. Where are they? And I kept kind of like having this circular thinking over and over again, and it was just diverting some of my brain power to thinking about that instead of focusing on the task that I needed to do. And I'm just, kicking myself and not focusing. So that was the problem as well. So not only were the notes kind of subpar, they were distracting me, and I was distracting myself, thinking, oh, what an idiot, how, I've lost the notes. So, not ideal at all. But I do like Che's deep thinking and his reflection on this stuff, and I can imagine him sitting there listening to the episode and thinking, how does this apply perhaps to my own way of playing and the things I do. So, yeah, as always, guys, if you're listening to these episodes and it provokes some thoughts or some comments along the lines that Che has shared this time, call it in. You can send me an email at spikepitpodcast@gmail.com, or hit me up on one of the Discords. I'm quite often over on the Dungeon Musings Discord, but probably email is easiest if you haven't got those details. I haven't got a load of other stuff set up. I've got a Patreon. You can contact me through the Patreon, the Spike Pit Patreon, or they are the main ways. The Spotify thing, worse than useless. The Anchor thing, I don't even know what that's doing now, and I haven't set up SpeakPipe, so there you go. Alternatively, you can just write a regular email and I'll read it out for you. It's nice to get them sometimes. We're in a world where the written word, I feel, takes a bit of a back seat at times, although being RPGers, maybe not so much. In the last episode, I mentioned the fact that my son has been picking up more board games. He's actually got a little bit of a board game purchasing habit going on. There is an upside to this, however. Well, obviously there's an upside. But putting aside my concerns for his finances and mildly addictive behaviour, played a really great game called King's Dilemma. Never heard of this game. I'm not up on the new releases in terms of game designs, and I don't even think it is a new release. I believe it came out in 2020. This game is unlike anything I've ever played before. in terms of board games. I would have to liken it to a kind of multiplayer, almost choose your own adventure, broadly speaking. What it is you are all councillors on an elected council. It plays out over generations. Each turn is the reign of a monarch, the king, who either kind of dies of old age or ends up abdicating, and this depends on what happens during his reign. As councillors, you have to decide on the fate of the land based on a series of events that are read out from a card, and you each have to decide through a process of voting what the king is to do. The interesting thing is this is a legacy game, so it always feels like the stakes are quite high. You want to do what's the best for the nation, broadly speaking, but every character has a responsibility of a house. Each house has achievements that they need to reach, and they score based on their ability to reach the specific house's achievements. In addition to this, secretly, everybody has chosen a hidden adventure, a hidden agenda, and the agenda defines your scoring. Now, because it's hidden, the other players don't know what you're doing. So it's a super political game, and there's these wranglings, and you're making your case. And although in the rules there's no stipulation that there's any role playing, it just sort of naturally seems to happen. You've got a kind of a paragraph or two describing your house. They have a kind of a statement at the end of the explanation that kind of sums up their general nature as a house. So, for example, the guys I'm playing, life is to be enjoyed. Okay, that's their kind of almost like a motto. Anyway, so you're playing along, and because you're trying to convince the other players of what needs to be done, there's bribery and corruption is on the table. You can bribe people with currency. You can make all sorts of promises. If you do actually make a promise, it is binding. But then you can like double cross people later on. So it's really interesting. And you vote, you have cards, and there's a couple of power players in the game. You've got a moderator and a leader, and you can vie for these positions. And every time a card or a statement is read in each turn of the game, the leader starts the voting. You vote either to agree with what the leader has just said. The leader can abstain and pass the kind of initiative to the next person in to the right of the leader. They then decide whether they want to they play some power tokens onto their card and they cast their vote. Then it passes to the next person. They vote either yay or nay, or they abstain. If you abstain, you can abstain and take control of the moderator position, or you can abstain for power tokens. Anyway, I won't bore you with the details. Suffice to say, we played 3 games of this back to back. And I want to say the first one was probably about an hour and a half. Then the second one finished really quick. And then the next one was perhaps an hour. And we strung it out over a longer period than that. We were talking. We had a lunch break, learning the game. But I tell you what, it was really engrossing, fascinating kind of gameplay. Really quite simple, but I feel we all got hooked by the story as it's unfolding. You've got a map of the kingdom that you're looking at, and then you kind of flip the map over, and then it's got the kingdom and the surrounding kingdoms. And there's various factions coming into play, and this whole big story is unfolding. I don't know the details of the game, most remiss of me, but I don't have them to hand, so I don't know who the publisher is. But King's Dilemma, really interesting, fun, engrossing. I can imagine people that like role-playing games. This is kind of role-playing adjacent in some ways. And yeah, if you're interested, check out some reviews for yourself. I don't know what's out there because, like I say, I didn't do the research on this game purchase. It was my son. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. You know, if you've got some older kids, maybe 14, 15 and upwards, it's quite good. My wife commented on how nice she thought it was to see us all sitting there, even though we're wrangling as these king's counsellors and taking on these roles. It was a super enjoyable, well, best part of like a good few hours, really. What I neglected to mention, of course, is you are moving tracks. You're trying to influence 5 different aspects of running a kingdom. I believe it's 5, and you're moving up and down these tracks. So there's like military might, there's morale, there's food. I can't remember the others. But you are moving these tracks, and depending on what your agenda is, you have like kind of, there's 3 kind of like good or light kind of agendas and 3 shady agendas. So the shady ones, I believe, are like greedy, I don't know, maybe aggressive, something like that. And then the good ones were moderate, opulence. It's stuff like this. And what it is you've got zones on these tracks. So someone like an extremist is trying to get 2 of the tracks opposite to each other, so maybe drive the food down really low or the wealth down really low and shift the military might up high. Or a moderate, you have to keep all of the tracks in a band across the middle. Or the extremist gets points for no, not the extremist, opportunist or opulence is pushing everything above the halfway point, so everybody's really happy. And then there's an opportunist that sort of finds opportunities from everything being down low, so he makes his money from everybody suffering and everything being below the halfway mark, stuff like that. So you're trying to tweak these dials without trying to be too obvious about what you're doing and betraying your hidden agenda, because once people know what you're trying to do, it becomes that much easier for them to block you. So there's this bluffing and this whole cloak and dagger aspect to it. But without explaining those tracks, those sliders, I'm thinking my explanation is missing a rather large chunk of how this game works. Well, I don't know what you folks think, but perhaps you'll agree that considering when I recorded this content in the run-up to the Halloween festivities, it's not surprising that we've ended up with a bit of a stitched together Frankenstein's monster of an episode. Anyway, I'm not going to make you suffer anymore. Let's put it out of its misery and finish up with an encouraging call-in from my old buddy Jason Connnerly from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. He needs no introduction. Let's hear what he's got to say.
Hey Colin, Jason here. Just listened to your latest episode, the Early Access OSR October. Thank you for including those calls. You know, it's a sad state, the things that Minion related, that you related, but important for people to think about. It was great hearing Liren's voice. I'm glad to hear they're doing okay. I wonder about them too. And as far as James West stuff, yeah, great stuff. I didn't realize the other issues of Black Pudding came out either, but I will buy them as soon as I get home because, yeah, I love all the stuff. So great job. Keep up the great work. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you soon.
And that, as they say, is a wrap. big thanks goes out to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to Old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.